Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us this morning for Data Science Friday. We've got Marcus Elwin here from Pocketlaw, and we're going to talk about AI contract review and the future of legal tech. But yeah, take it away, Marcus.
Nice. Thank you, David. Thanks, everyone, for joining. So my name is Marcus, and I work at Pocketlaw, and I wanted to share with you some stuff about AI-driven contract review that we've been working on, and also some predictions for the future of legal tech connected to AI that I've been looking into a bit lately. But to start, I just wanted to tell you a bit about myself so you know who I am. So my name is Marcus. I'm currently lead AI engineer at Pocketlaw. I have a background in computer science and machine learning from KTH here in Stockholm. I've been working with ML now for the past 7 years in various roles and industries. And I came in contact with AI for the first time in 2015 when I did an exchange in France. So at the time, I was doing the good old data mining. So all before generative AI and all that other type of hype, which was interesting, but not as cool as today. I've been working with regular data science, a lot of machine learning, but also deep learning before. But now I'm focusing mainly on Gen AI. But also had a short stint as working as a PM as well. When I worked at Tink, I also been working at ICA Gruppen, just a retail company in Sweden, and also I've been working at Nasdaq. I've been at Pocketlaw now for, I think it's almost 18 months. And also a shameless plug. I have a personal blog, and I also have my LinkedIn profile if you want to connect and read stuff. I sometimes post things I think of, not connected to work, but just things I think are fun. Yeah, stuff. So if you have time, please take a look. And yeah, I'm from Gothenburg, so that's why I have this Volvo Cars shirt. I actually work for Volvo, but not in Stockholm, not in Gothenburg, but in Stockholm. Cool. And also, I need to say something about Pocketlaw from my supervisors, so if not, they would have been angry at me. So just a brief overview of Pocketlaw. But we are mainly an AI-driven contract lifecycle management platform. So the whole idea with Pocketlaw when it was founded in 2018 was to streamline and automate legal processes and workflows. So it started with what they call the template library. You could do a bunch of templates for various types of contracts like NDAs or whatever. Then we expanded into AI. When I joined in 2023, you can have different type of workflows. You can approve various tasks. You can sign contracts. If you have like an employment contract, you can store all your contracts and we extract meaningful metadata from them and make them searchable by indexing them. You can also track various analytical insights. So we started as a CLM platform. Other legal tech providers might have started as an AI assistant nowadays, but we kind of came from the other end. And now we have kind of merged these two capabilities together, being both AI driven, but also having this CLM platform. We also have a Word plugin. So in my demo, I'll show you a bit how contract review looks in that, because lo and behold, legal people tend to like Word, or tend to like Word, so we need to be there as well. Cool. But let's dive into this topic then, AI-driven contract review and other type of entailment problems, because it turns out that this contract review problem is very related to entailment. So first of all, if we talk about contract review and how AI can help. So legal contract review is this process of examining a contract's terms and conditions to a legal or business type of guidelines. And at various companies, these guidelines might be expressed in a policy document. They might be expressed in a PDF or a PowerPoint presentation. And some people use what we call a playbook that we will dive into a bit more. But this is basically a structured document stating, for a clause, you should do this and that. For a clause, you shouldn't do this and that. This is what we allow. This is what we don't allow. And for lawyers, before AI, this whole contract review process is actually quite time consuming. Some studies estimate that it can take up to 50 to 80% slower of doing this manually compared to using AI. And I've been speaking to a lot of our clients that are using the platform, and they told me that maybe before they used us, all that they were doing was reviewing contracts. But now, with the help of AI, or similar tools like Pocketlaw, they can do what's their main task, a focus on more tricky stuff. But yeah, a very time-consuming problem. And when we talk about contract review, there are kind of some key artifacts we think of, at least from Pocketlaw. So you have this company playbook or this policy document that you do something with. You specify what you want to type of rules to follow. You have some contract from some party. So let's say you have a sales agreement or a deal with someone. They are the other party. Then in our case, we have the AI or the large language model, which is analyzing the contract and checking various stuff through this playbook. We have this kind of review agent that I will talk a bit more of, that is built around agents and agentic workflows to do this review in a smart way. And we also have this chat functionality, because what we realized quite early on is that lawyers were not happy with us providing things automatically 100% of the way. They kind of want some control of this review process, which is why we have this chat functionality that you can talk to the assistant or agent and give input and feedback to how you want to tailor your review. But these are some of the key artifacts that we have identified or that we use in our solution. So this can, of course, vary from other providers, but I think they're quite common still, especially this playbook part and how you want to adhere with contracts. And just to show you what I mean with a playbook, in the Pocketlaw world, the playbook is a structured file or a structured JSON example of structuring policies and rules for the large language model. So on the left-hand side, here is an example of a playbook. You have an ID, you have a name, and you have a preamble. All of this information is kind of input to the prompt as context to the LLM with a bunch of other stuff that we have. And how we think of it is that the playbook has sections, and each section has a rule, and each rule has various entries. So for instance, if you check in the sections on line 10, you have a section called Identifying Contracting Parties, and the corresponding rules then for the section on line 11 are one rule to identify the parties, then you might have other rules to say this and that. And if you check on line 16 to 20, you see the actual entry, which is giving details to them. Okay, clearly identify all parties involved in this NDA contract. So this is what we found was a good abstraction to start with when we built the product. So that's why we did this. And the whole idea of doing this is kind of to capture domain knowledge and structure it in a nice way, both for the LLM, but also for us when we present the results to the end user. And of course, not all these playbooks are not the same, like they can vary a lot from various clients and various formats. So what we do in our current solution is that we have this playbook type of review, but we also allow the end user or client to prompt their suggestions or whatever type of things they want the AI to do in the review. So we kind of support both of these things. And there's also maybe a realization we realized when building this project. When we started, we thought that the playbook format would be the one-way shop to do things. But then we realized when talking to other clients that, okay, but you have all these weird formats. It's impossible for us to make like a universal parser. Even if LLMs are good at parsing stuff, you have a lot of edge cases. So that's why we allow them to prompt as well and be a bit more freely. But this is what we mean with this playbook. Basically a way of structuring policies and rules for the LLM, which is important in this contract review process. And if we digress a bit, so I said in the beginning that this contract review problem is kind of connected to entailment. And entailment is kind of the problem for an AI to see, is this clause or statement following certain rules? Is it matching? Is it not matching? Is it contradicting and so on? So when we started to build this product, we were thinking of, okay, what are some key type of skills an agent would need in order to do this type of entailment or solve this contract review? So there are a bunch of skills that are maybe not exclusive only for review, but for these type of matching problems in general. You need to be able to find entities or named entity recognition in a text or a corpus. You need to be able to classify various clauses into various stuff. You need to be able to understand the semantic meaning of a clause. For instance, is this clause contradicting something else, or what does it actually mean? Especially in legal parlance, the semantic meaning is quite important because they might say something that can mean a different thing, which is quite interesting. And the agent or AI also needs to be able to assess the risk in not following a certain stuff or not following a policy. So these are kind of the 4 key skills we have identified that is needed for a contract review agent to operate. So in the lens of contract review, if we check with entailment, I have 3 examples here. So you think of pure entailment, or you also have implicit and direct entailment. But if you think of entailment, one example could be that we tell the agent to determine if a specific clause implies a condition or consequence. An example here could be that termination clause. So in a contract, you normally say this will terminate in, let's say, 10 months. And this can also imply termination for convenience, which is a legal term that it can basically terminate earlier based on certain requirements for the parties. You also have this type of contradiction or contradictory clauses. So identify if these 2 clauses contradict each other. So governing law is the country where the contract would be working for. So the governing law is Spain, but the contract states Portugal, or our policy states that would be a contradiction in the state. And then you have different type of neutral clauses. So determine whether a clause is unrelated or carries no bearing for a specific condition. So a typical example is this kind of force majeure clause that in the case of unforeseen events, we wouldn't have to do anything. But this is not related to a clause about payment terms. So the AI agent needs to kind of understand that this is neutral, they are not connected. So these three different types of the judicial logic, or what you want to call it, is quite important in the contract review process. You need to be able to entail what certain things mean. You need to be able to understand if these things are contradicting each other, but you also need to understand if they don't have any bearing or if they are neutral to each other. This is kind of how we see the connection between contract review and entailment. And I mean, this is not unique for law. You have other type of entailment problems in other industries. I actually looked at some other solutions in completely different part of things, and I kind of feel that there's always a lot of work around. You have some sort of source material that you want to match to another material, and this kind of matching process needs to be done in a clever way, which is sort of like entailment. Cool. And if we move on to the actual agent flow for contract review, I suspect many of you have heard about agents, but I'll just give a brief high-level view from my end what an agent is. But at least in my point of view, if you talk about the generative AI agent cycle, you have the generative AI agent in the middle, and it tries to observe its environment with the various inputs, like a contract in this example, and a user question or a bunch of questions. The agent then tries to reason and plan what it should do based on this query or this question. It then tries to act independently on your behalf, if you allow it, to solve this problem by achieving goals. This is, of course, a quite simplified view of an agent. If you've read some of these latest white papers from Google and all that, they have this quite a nice overview with this orchestration layer and the tools extending the LLMs capabilities. So there's a lot of definitions around this. But I think this is just a good high-level view. And then you can, of course, dive into more details on what you have to do to build these various steps. But also notice this kind of circular loop, because it's a loop, it's not a sequence, right? The agent or AI has to kind of solve the problem in a loop until it reaches some sort of desired state or desired outcome. So if we look to our process, how we see this agent loop, it starts with a bunch of various steps, right? So the first thing that our agent is doing is that, okay, the process begins. It starts to review the contract, check these clauses and texts, and try to understand what type of information we have there. Then we try to reason and deduce these various types of entailment clauses. If you remember, I mentioned entailment, contradiction, and neutral statements and all that, which the agent is analyzing. Then based on that, it tries to verify how good is the contract adhering to this policy document, this playbook we're having. And then it does this in a loop, because it might realize that, okay, my current suggestion here, my current check here didn't match. I need to go back and redo my work. So this loop can continue for some time. And when we're happy, or when the agent is happy, we try to format the view to make it look pretty when we display it to the front end or our app. And then you get a comprehensive report stating what you should change. So we call this suggestions, what you should keep, and various stuff. So this is kind of the high-level process of how this review agent in our system works. And again, this might be different from other providers. They might have, 5 other steps or whatnot. But in our experiments and when we built this product, we kind of found that this process was a good way of both controlling the output. It's not deterministic, of course, because large language models are non-deterministic by default, but at least we can reduce some of the noise by doing this kind of control flow. And then it's also important to notice that you always have the human lawyer or legal professional being able to input in these various steps on various things. Cool. So I also thought it would be interesting to dive into like some research foundations for not particularly contract review, but related technologies, or especially around prompting, what you can do for these type of entailment problems. So I won't go into all details here, but I don't know if you heard about this Manus AI that's been all the rave recently. So I got access, so I did try it. So I did an interactive AI report. If you want to scan it and try it there, you can read more about these topics. But yeah, it's a cool agented tool that maybe we'll talk more about another time. But anyhow, there's an interactive report if you want to dive into this a bit more deeper. But what I want to highlight is that we have basically tried various of these state-of-the-art prompting techniques and trying to find what's the best abstraction to solve this problem. So you have this human level prompt engineering type of technique. Chain of thought is very common. The tree of thoughts, which is an extension. Branch solve merge approach, kind of like prompt chaining. Self-consistency is super important for agentic workflows. Also reflection. You also have this kind of multi-agent debate. So there's a lot of techniques you can do. And I would recommend, if you're interested, to read some of these papers if you want to dive into some of the details. But if you want to have a shortcut, you can try my Manus AI interactive report. But we have tried, at least when we built this product, to ground it in some sort of scientific grounding to make sure that we are not just making up things. That's probably, if you've been working with prompting and LLMs lately, it feels often like more of an art than a science these days. And of course, you have various frameworks to do this. And I think this is one way of trying to make it a bit more scientific, at least from our standpoint. Cool. I also want to tell you something that's haven't been that approachable before, but quite recently, an American company called Valse AI did this first quite wide AI benchmark. So not only for contract review, but for legal tasks in general. So on the left-hand side, you see there are various tasks that they have tried. Both the lawyer giving a baseline. So all these numbers you see are accuracy in their metric. So you have the lawyer baseline, then you have various legal tools. We were not invited this time, which was a bit sad, but hopefully we can part of it next time. But it started with Codon Consulting, which is a tool from Thomson Reuters. Vincent AI is a smaller company. Harvey is a quite hyped and famous AI tool in the US. And then you have Oliver, another tool from a company called VicFlow, which is also starting to gain some popularity. And then you have the task average. So what they realized in this benchmark, basically, to be useful from a legal point of view, you need to be able to be good at extracting data. We mentioned this named entity recognition, a capability they needed, right? You need to be good at answering questions about a document. You need to be good at summarizing documents for various purposes. You need to be good at redlining. So redlining is basically, if the review agent gives you suggestions, you want to insert them in a document. You can sometimes call this a markup. And this is the redlining. So that's basically when lawyers check your document, they redline parts of it and say, hey, you need to change things here. That's where that terminology came from. But it's basically replacing text based on some policy, making suggestions is redlining. So you have this transcript analysis and also chronology generation. So particularly, if you have many documents, you want to establish like a timeline of key events. This can be quite important for like criminal, legal research and all those type of things. And then you have this Edgar research, which is a proxy for doing legal research. So I think what is interesting is that in many of these benchmarks, many of these tools were actually outperforming the lawyer baseline, which is good. Then companies like us have actually a value to show where, okay, you can get value with AI doing this legal type of stuff. But what's also interesting is that redlining is actually a quite hard problem, meaning to get these suggestions right, many of these tools fail this. So on the right-hand side, you see the lawyer baseline in gray, and then you have two tools, Vincent AI and Harvey, who were the only ones who participated. It's also good to know in the study, the companies could say which part of the testing they wanted to participate in. And I can think, or you can deduce a line, if they're not participating, they're probably quite bad at this. So there's only two actors here, which are not that good, actually. If you think about 60% accuracy, which Harvey had, that's probably not good enough for many lawyers, really, with redlining. And we've also noticed there's a lot of work to get redlining working. You have a lot of edge cases and all this and that to make this work. But also another key finding from the study that I recommend if you read is that even if you get to 80% accuracy, but you can improve efficiency by 80x, you have still come a long way. That is also something they saw that, okay, you get 80% of the way, but you save 80x of the time. That's quite powerful, right? So there's also like something to push for, not only for legal, but I think in many type of AI type of products to say, okay, you get 80% of the way, but you save this amount of time. That's probably a lot of gains already. Then, of course, accuracy will never be 100%, but you will bump this bit by bit. Cool. Then a short demo. And like a chef, I already prepared a video. So let's see if this works. I'm just nicely to switch my tab here. Just a second. All right, it's running. Cool. So this is a NDA contract I had. Here you see our Word plugin and the review options. So you can use this playbook review, which predefined playbooks we have, or upload your own, or you can prompt a playbook. But here I'm taking one we had at Pocketlaw, which is an NDA playbook. You can also add additional context. You can also modify the playbook here. Again, all this is prompting or input to the LLM when we prompt it. And this is kind of how I've structured these various type of rules you saw in the JSON file. You start the review. It takes maybe up to 2-3 minutes sometimes. But I think I caught it here, so it should be done soon, I hope. And then let's see it starting. And now it's almost done. In this case, it was 11 or 12 rules we were reviewing in parallel here. So let's wait a bit to see what output we get here. So this is kind of the output from our part of the review. So you have a review summary, basically telling you how good is the contract adhering to your policy document or playbook. Then you have the review results. Yellow here is suggestions, where we could tell you that you need to do some changes based on the AI. You get some reasoning for this. You get references to the actual rule. You can highlight in the document. You can do this automatic red lines or markups, as we call it. And kind of having this integrated is kind of wowing a lot of lawyers because they immediately see the value of saving time. But again, you see this redlining. It looks simple here when we apply it. Actually, it's a damn hard problem to get this right. Because there's a lot of edge cases to solve this. But of course, I took one example that worked here because I wanted to show you this. But yeah, so this is basically how we have built this solution. Cool. So that was my topic on AI contract review. I say I was a bit quicker than I expected. So I don't know, David, should we open for a question or should we wait at the end? Or what do you think?
I think it would be best to leave all the questions till the end if the audience doesn't mind. Yeah, just for the sake of being able to stop the recording.
Cool. But then I'll move on. Then we'll have more time for questions if there are any. But this is how we can approach the AI contract review problem. And I guess key takeaways I want you to take from that is that this is a type of entailment problem. There are various good prompt engineering techniques you can do this to get quite accurate results. But there will always be edge cases and tricky scenarios that you need to handle with other logic than purely AI or LLM based to make an end-to-end product working. Is maybe my key takeaways here. But if we move on to the future and be a bit more, predictive in mind. But before we do that, I wanted to start looking at today. So this is based on my perspective, kind of the state of legal AI at the moment. So one observation I have is that you have legal professionals that have started to use AI, in particularly large language models. And this has been a quite driving force because of the accessibility and ease of use, and you talk natural language, right? But so far, this is quite limited compared to other professionals or other knowledge workers as software engineers. So this graph you see here is from Anthropic's recent economic index study. So this data is open source. So what I did was that I took their data and tried to map what I called operational professions, which is mainly legal work and other type of operations type of works. And I tried to map it to this graph. So on the y-axis, you have the percentage of Claude conversations. So in the study, they had like millions of conversations that they anonymized in Claude. And then they connected it to something called ONET, which is like a family of employment categories in the US. So this is US data, so maybe not 100% applicable to EU, but it gives us some indication. And then you have on the x-axis, the median annual wage from the US, from the user using this conversation. So you see that, okay, computer programmers are having quite a lot of conversations in Claude with somewhere in the middle wage, but then you have some high income professions. And if I recall correctly, there was many like in medical industry, like doctors, basically. They were a bit more negative into using AI in this sense. But then you also have this orange box here of the legal professionals. They're not as pessimistic as the doctors, but they're not as positive as us doing engineering. So I guess the key takeaway here is that we have a gap to fill, an opportunity to make them use AI tools much more better, right? But I can also recommend this study. I think this is the first study that I know of where I should try to map AI usage to some sort of economical impact or impact on professions. Cool. But if we start with my predictions, so I will have 3 predictions, one in 6 months, one in 12 months, and one in 3+ years. So in 6 months, you probably have noticed that the price of reasoning models have decreased quite a lot. You have actors like DeepSeek from China, the O1, O3 family, GPT-4, 5, and the 5 model, which is supposed to be launched soon. You have Sonnet 3.7, etc. These have transformed a lot with how LLMs work with reasoning, basically doing the chain of thought processing inherently in the model, but they're also approaching the cost of zero. Like getting access to intelligence basically it has drastically reduced. And we think that in the coming 6 months, this will be even cheaper. And I did some estimates. I'll get back to how I done these estimates, but I estimated the likelihood for this is roughly 65%. And some of the implications you can think of here is that if intelligence is cheap or almost free, what will this mean for us building products? We will probably build better products for users, but for the end user, the costs will probably not go down that much. And that's mainly because of something called Jevons effect. So the more you use something, the more the total prices increases. They might see some slight price reductions, but as this gets like commonplace or like a module in a component, it will be more focused on building great products as a product team or as a consulting team, rather than having to build state-of-the-art AI models on your own, especially in the legal area. This is the first prediction. I looked 12 months ahead, so you probably know that AI agents has kind of been, or is the rave this year. Everyone is talking about agent this, agent that, horizontal, vertical agents. It's a lot of talks about agents. And I think that in the legal space, some sort of legal agent would be used for maybe 60 to 80% of critical legal workflows. And what I mean with critical legal workflows is, for instance, contract review that we spoke of. But you can also think about other workflows like legal research that can be driven forward by agentic workflows. And this is also driven by these model improvements and the cost of reasoning kind of deducing. Again, my estimate here is that this is probably 70 to 75% likely, but I don't think that we will have fully autonomous systems yet in the near future. And this is mainly from my previous observation working with legal people or other type of industries where you need control. People like to have control. They like to tell the AI agent what it was doing. Fun side story is that when we added streaming to our chat, the first feedback we got from our legal professionals was that they thought the streaming was too quick because they couldn't keep up in reading what the AI was doing because they would like to control more, like if you were talking to a junior associate. But now I see you're texting with me, you're chatting with me. So we had to kind of slow down our streaming to make it a bit more slower for the perspective. Again, because they want to control. So even if we would have AI agents being much more capable than they are today, I still think this element of control would kind of block this fully autonomous future that maybe some of us might have foreseen or might foresee. And then my final prediction, this is more out of the box or more non-deterministic, but I don't think it's unlikely that in the coming 3+ years, give or take, we might see sparks of early systems using AGI in legal and adjacent fields. My estimate here is roughly, is a bit wider range you can see here, so 34 to 45%. And I also added some other predictions from other sources when we will have AGI. For instance, AI Impact Survey thinks that we will have a 2040. Yeah, thank you, Lumina. And Meticulous Community thinks we will have it already in 2030. And you have industry leaders like Sam Altman or Amudi from Anthropic and OpenAI that thinks we will have it now or in 2 years. Of course, this is in their interest. You might have heard of this kind of weird definition from Microsoft. I think it was saying that AGI needs to make $100 billion US in revenue. I don't really understand how this is connected to intelligence, but and they had some academic services saying that it's way, way ahead if it didn't happen, like between 2040 to 2060. But my kind of bold prediction here is that I don't think it's unreasonable that we see some sparks of this. And also getting back to the likelihoods, like how am I getting these numbers? I don't have any good data set or not any surveys I've done. So what I did, as any type of same person would do, is that I use all these deep research tools basically. So I tried deep research from OpenAI. I tried deep research from Perplexity. I also tried deep research from Desmanus AI, and I kind of aggregated the average estimates they gave me. So I was kind of acting as this wisdom of the crowns predictor. So they are AI generated likelihoods, but again, this is kind of a proxy I could best have done without having data at hand. Cool. So that was what I had. So thank you. And thanks for letting me speak and taking the time.